Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to have you here tonight for the OPA's We're Listening event. My name is Dr. Hinata Biela, and I'm the OPA President and Psychotherapy Initiative Lead, as well as the incoming chair for the Ontario Medical Association section on psychiatry. I would like to thank our sponsors, Bell Let's Talk and the Coalition of Ontario Psychiatrists, whose generous contributions made this evening possible. In this phase of my OPA presidency, I wanted to reach out to additional community stakeholders to build on the importance of continuing crucial conversations about mental illness so as to further destigmatize it and its treatment. This work strikes a particular chord for me in my advocacy around continuing full access to long-term and intensive psychotherapies. It is my hope, therefore, that this event opens up new perspectives and understanding about the value of talking about mental health challenges, particularly in terms of intersectionality and about getting connected to treatment because we're listening. We have a fantastic lineup today. Dr. Chika Stacy Orioa will be our keynote speaker, sharing with us her advocacy journey in helping to address some of the unique mental health needs of racialized populations. Additional special guests include Dr. Khalil Bashon, who will highlight Indigenous mental health issues, and Dr. Yusra Ahmad, who will explore grounding in the return to rootedness during times of turmoil. We are also pleased to feature a partnership between Eric Windler from Jackorg and Alex Aid from the Born This Way Foundation, discussing their joint cross-border work on suicide prevention through the Be There program. As a component of our Indigenous Health Initiative, we're looking to forge meaningful ties with the Indigenous communities in the province. This work has included incorporating current Indigenous mental health stories in our newsletters, creating educational content on Indigenous issues, and connecting with Indigenous peoples for feedback on allyship. In consultation with Indigenous individuals on an approach for virtual events, we received guidance on putting forward a land acknowledgement that is anchored to Peel Region, as that is where our main OPA office is located. It is as follows. We would like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we gather and which the region of Peel operates is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. For thousands of years, Indigenous peoples inhabited and cared for this land. In particular, we acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe Chippewa peoples, the land that is home to Métis, and most recently, the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who are direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land, and by doing so, give our respect to its first inhabitants. So the OPA would like to recognize the Peel Aboriginal Network and the other local Indigenous groups who helped develop the land acknowledgement for Peel Region. So to follow up on these important Indigenous health issues, we have Dr. René Vachon bringing her expertise on this matter. Dr. Vachon is a psychiatrist and a Northern Ontario School of Medicine, or NOSM, assistant professor in Thunder Bay. She graduated from the University of Ottawa Medical School and completed her psychiatric training with NOSM. Originally from a remote Northwestern community, Dr. Vachon is proud to have returned to the region to provide hospital-based psychiatric service to vulnerable populations, including inpatient and consultation liaison services. Prior to her career in medicine, she worked as a registered nurse providing primary care in a remote fly-in First Nation community. Dr. Vachon is committed to providing mental health care and access to all people in the Northwest region and strives to provide culturally safe and informed care to her Indigenous patients. Dr. Vachon's personal connections to this land and its people have given her firsthand experience and perspective related to the iniquities that exist in the North. Welcome, Dr. Vachon.
Hello. My name is Renee Vachon. I'm a psychiatrist here in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Thank you very much to the OPA for inviting me to speak today and to advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'd first like to begin by starting with a land acknowledgement. I know this has already possibly been done in the virtual event, but I'd like to do another one. So I've put up the map here of the treaties in Ontario, and currently in Thunder Bay I reside in the Robinson Superior Treaty that was created in 1850, and I'd like to acknowledge the first people of this land. And I think I certainly enjoy the beauty and the natural surroundings of the area, and I think that I'd like to acknowledge and express gratitude to the first peoples of this land for protecting and respecting the land for thousands of years prior to now, and I look forward to hopefully the preservation of the land for generations to come. And so, Miigwech, thank you. Thank you. So I just provide a bit more background. I'm speaking today around Indigenous mental health and Indigenous well-being, and I'm not an expert in traditional culture and traditional spiritual healings of Indigenous culture, and I didn't have the opportunity to grow up with these kinds of teachings, but I do know that there is some aspect of continuity and circularity in traditional Indigenous teachings. And most people are familiar with the medicine wheel. And I wanted to speak to that today and acknowledge how everything is connected in nature, but as well within ourselves. And I'd like to speak about balance for us, because most of us I know who are participating in this event are likely providers and provide service providers, healthcare providers, and I want to ensure and encourage all of us to think about our own wellness and our own balance in who we are in the different areas of our life where we're needed, and in particular how we care for our clients, our patients, and how they need us to be well in order to provide empathy and compassionate care. And so I encourage all of you, who, especially those of us who work in mental health, who are there to support people through their pain, their emotional pain, their trauma, their grief, that in order to do that and to do it well and actually be genuine, you have to maintain your own wellness. And I encourage all of you to do that. And just in regards to, some of the specifics around the region and being from the north of Ontario and growing up in the Northwest, here's a map. I just wanted to put it into context for people, the number of Indigenous communities that are in the Northwest, and how I work in a tertiary center in Thunder Bay that services many of the Indigenous and remote communities. And, we work in the front line when people are in crises, potentially harm to themselves, coming down possibly on a Form 1. And I do want to speak to what I see in my line of work and what I feel I am doing. I often get a sense that it's very downstream sequelae of generations of unjust government policy that has marginalized Indigenous people. And I think that the health sequelae from these policies, including residential schools, the Indian Act, the child welfare system, that those policies have really led to a significant amount of mental health disparities amongst Indigenous people. And I could focus more on that, but instead I would like to focus on next steps and truth and reconciliation. And I would encourage all of you listeners to inform yourself about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada and the calls to action. Because I'm not an expert on what we can do to improve that health and well-being of Indigenous clients, Indigenous people in our communities and in the North. But I do know that upstream policy change and community level intervention when it comes to housing security, food security, education and employment opportunities are all things that are going to improve the mental health and well-being of our Indigenous clients. And so I call to you, listeners, to educate and inform yourself, advocate to those that are in those positions to possibly make change at the community level, while at the same time, providing service on the front line. And I think there's many things we can do to inform ourselves in a more to be more inclusive and to be more, I think, historically informed in our day-to-day care. And I would encourage you to do that. I really appreciate getting the opportunity today to speak out and to speak my mind, and thank you very much for this opportunity. Miigwech.
Thank you, Dr. Vachon. To expand upon such important issues, the OPA will be holding its inaugural Indigenous Health Series talk in June 2022 to align with National Indigenous History Month. Stay tuned for details. For our keynote address, we have the incredible, multi-talented Dr. Chika Stacy Orioa. Dr. Orioa is a graduate of the University of Toronto Faculty of Medicine, where she was named the valedictorian of her graduating medical class. She is a physician, professional spoken word poet, public speaker, writer, and advocate for racialized and marginalized populations. Presently, Dr. Orioa is completing her residency in psychiatry at the University of Toronto, where she aims to go on to complete further subspecialist training in neuropsychiatry. Dr. Orioa also serves on Indigo's board of directors, using her expertise to influence their efforts in creating equal opportunity and curating spaces of wellness and inclusion. She is a recipient of numerous prestigious awards and honors, including being recognized as one of Best Health Magazine's 2020 Women of the Year and Time Magazine's 2021 Next Generation Leader. Additionally, Dr. Orioa was recently honored in Mattel's #ThankYouHeroes campaign, alongside 5 other women, with a one-of-a-kind Barbie doll made in her image to commemorate her contributions as a frontline healthcare worker.
Hello, my name is Dr. Chika Orioa, and this is my presentation entitled Evolution of an Advocate, Translating Passion into Purpose as a Black Woman in Medicine. I'm a second-year resident in psychiatry at the University of Toronto, and I have the honor of being able to provide this presentation, which will highlight the importance of mental health, advocacy, and diversity within medicine. I wanted to start off this presentation highlighting some of the invisible challenges that I faced throughout medical school and right into my journey now in residency. Now, these quotes were things that were said to me either by staff, attendings, peers, tutors, other residents, as well as patients and even random people in the public. And these are quotes that I'm going to continuously touch on throughout the course of this presentation. Did they make it easier for you to get in here? Do we really need a medical class that is reflective of the population? You're not a doctor, and anyone who is not a part of the medical team should leave. I wouldn't let her treat me or give me medicine. I've heard this one several times, and recently just a few months ago. Chika, you're kidding me, right? That can't actually be your name. You were the only one that tried, the best of a bad situation. You really needn't be so sensitive. Excuse me, you forgot to clean vomit off the floor. That's your problem, not mine. Your people just aren't as smart, and that's why they're not in medicine. I would never want you to provide medical care to my children. So I will take an opportunity to touch on a few of these quotes throughout the presentation. But before that, I wanted to start with the beginning of my evolution of an advocate, my origin story. Now, this is a picture of myself at about 4 years old. And this was around the age when my mother said that I had declared to the world that I wanted to be a doctor. Now, this was very interesting because at that age, I'd actually never seen a Black physician practicing within Canada. And I certainly had never seen a Black female physician. And it wouldn't be for many, many, many years until my university and medical school experience that I actually came to know and meet a Black physician in the flesh. And so I also put this picture here of my mother just to highlight that my parents were Nigerian immigrants. They were settlers in Canada, and they came to Canada in the 1980s and had 4 children, myself and my 3 siblings, which I put here. And I really wanted to highlight the importance of representation and to use this slide to describe the fact that although I knew I wanted to be a doctor from a very young age, I did not have that representation there within the field. And so one can inherently surmise that I had to overcome this idea that maybe I didn't necessarily belong in medicine because nobody in medicine actually looked like me. And so now fast forward a little bit to my undergraduate years, and I want to talk about my experience of poetry and how poetry was really the infancy of my advocacy. Now, I've been writing poetry since I was about 6 or 7 years old, and I always viewed it as a form of self-expression. And when I was in university, I became a coach and a mentor, a tutor of poetry within the community of Hamilton, where I was doing my undergraduate. I was at McMaster University in the health sciences program, and I reached out to minority youth within the community, and I encouraged them and taught them how to use poetry as a form of self-advocacy and socio-political activism. And I wanted to enable them to use their voice and their platform to process their lived experience. And I would say that this was really where my spark, my love for mental health came from, because naturally poetry is a way that we process our emotions and process our feelings. And so I put here a picture of myself and some of the youth that I work with, and we won the citywide Louder Than a Bob championships back in 2015 for spoken word, and also just a picture of me performing, because that is truly at the core of so much of the work that I do, my art. And so fast forward now to 2013, and this is a picture of myself and my closest friends at the time. This was just a few months before we were set to write our MCAT, so the medical college assessment or admissions test that is used to get into medical school. And as you can see here, I'm the only Black individual in the car. We were going across the border to do some retail therapy, retail shopping. As we were crossing the border, the patrol officer, who normally asks a gambit of questions to individuals who are crossing the border, had stated, "How do you all know each other?" And we said that we were all health sci students at Mac who wanted to become doctors. And he lurched closer towards the window. He looked directly at me and he said, "Even you?" And I said, "Yes, I definitely have always wanted to become a doctor, and that is what I'm trying to do." And he said, "Really?" And there was this back and forth exchange between me and this officer who was blatantly accusing me of lying and stating that my dream of becoming a physician was not actually real. And so I put this quote here from Flair magazine, in this article that I wrote in Flair magazine for Black History Month: "In my white coat, I am more Black than ever." And it states, "It was clear what the officer was trying to imply. A Black female physician? Impossible." And this really speaks to the hazards of implicit bias and the lack of representation within medicine, and how that can translate into these simple yet dangerous and harmful moments. And so I wanted to take the opportunity to speak very briefly about this article that was written by Moniza Walji, Dr. Moniza Walji, who wanted to explore diversity in medical education. And very briefly here, one of the key points that she had touched upon was that the importance of having diversity in medical education is that physicians from underrepresented backgrounds are more likely to increase access to care, because they're more likely to go back and serve these medically underserved areas from which they came. And that is amongst all of the multitude of other reasons, including enriching the educational environment, not only for the underrepresented learners, but also for the other learners in that space, introducing more diverse narratives, increasing their empathy and their cultural awareness. And also, she highlights here the importance, or the paucity, or the discrepancy between the percentage of medical students who identified as Black, so under the umbrella of African and Caribbean, which is about 2.9% in 2012, and how that was a poor reflection of the general population, which stood at around 6%. And she also aimed to explore some of the other barriers that really limited the success of Black youth in medicine. So really, when we're talking about barriers, I like to start off with capital, this idea of the different kinds of capital. So namely, we all are familiar with financial capital, and one can surmise the ways in which having access to more money would improve your chances of getting into medical school. And so, for example, having tutoring throughout all of your educational years, but especially in undergrad and especially for MCAT prep courses, for example, and having access to being able to go on different volunteer trips, for example, which are very expensive, but reflect well on medical school applications. And then also having the privilege of not necessarily needing to work throughout your studies, or not necessarily needing to work while you're studying for the MCAT. And so having access to that kind of capital can be quite beneficial for applicants who are going into medical school. And we tend to see that discrepancy, that socioeconomic discrepancy within Black communities. But then there's also social capital. So having access to individuals who can demystify the nuances of pursuing medicine is something that is incredibly invaluable. So that social inheritability, and having individuals within the community who are physicians who can mentor you and train you and guide you through the process of applying to medical school. And when you don't have enough Black doctors in the community, you can imagine why there would not be enough mentorship, not enough guidance for individuals who are interested. And then lastly, there's really this idea around systemic racism and the discrimination, and how that permeates different areas of society, namely educational, and the ways in which Black children are disproportionately discriminated against within the educational system and steering them away from the STEM, but then also in child welfare and criminal justice and the overrepresentation of Black children in these areas. So one can surmise how, if we're impacting the trajectory of the youth from a very young age, why is it that at the end of the pipeline, we're not seeing as many Black doctors as one would hope? And now I also wanted to explore another research article that was done by an incredible group of physicians here at the University of Toronto, entitled Patients, Pride and Prejudice, Exploring Black Ontario Physicians' Experiences of Racism and Discrimination. And they really looked at the experiences of Black medical trainees. And what they had found amongst the respondents is that about 71% of respondents had experienced differential treatment based on their racial background. And 95% said that they had not received any kind of training on how to deal with these incidents of racism. So when we're talking about the issue of mental health, and we're talking about minority mental health, one can really surmise the experience of a Black medical trainee who is having to encounter the burden and the trauma of racism during their training, and not actually receiving adequate support as to how to process and unpack that. And I'm going to talk about how that specific context influenced my own experiences throughout medical school. Now, there's a few quotes that I also wanted to pull, and one of them that I wanted to touch on from this article was a quote from a respondent who said that, as a medical student, myself and other Black students were told that we had to work harder to appear as competent as our white colleagues. And that is certainly an experience that resonates with me quite a lot, and impacted my own mental wellness throughout the course of my medical training. And even till now, is this idea that we have to overcome these negative stereotypes, that we have to prove our competency time and time again, and that we also have to appear as perfect as to not disrupt this image that we have struggled so hard to attain for ourselves, to be merit-based and to be competent physicians in this field. And now, fast forward to my experience as an advocate in my first year of medical school. So in 2016, I started medical school at the University of Toronto. I was one of 259 medical students, and I was the only Black medical student. And actually now, in my second year of residency, it is my 9th year in which I have been the only Black student in my training cohort in my level. So from the beginning of my undergraduate experience to now. And that experience, and these experiences throughout the course of the last almost decade, but specifically within medical school, is quite problematic, because, as I stated, there's this vulnerability of being a Black woman in the space. There's a vulnerability of having your competency and your merit questioned. I remember on the first day of my medical school experience, during my stethoscope ceremony, someone asked if they had made it easier for me to get into medical school. And so I felt like I needed to prove myself. I felt like I needed to prove my worth within that space, that I had earned my spot. And so there was this dangerous pursuit of perfectionism, but then also not seeing myself reflected in the field as well. So not seeing as many Black professors and tutors, and seeing a lack of diversity within the medical material was also something that was definitely really challenging to have to face. And so I wrote this article that really, or sorry, I gave an interview where I discussed overcoming imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is really just this idea that you feel like you don't belong in the space or that you haven't earned your place in that space. And that really is compounded when you lie at different intersections. So being a woman and being a Black individual, the imposter syndrome was amplified. And so I stated that I felt alienated and it took a toll on my mental health. I felt hopeless and struggled with low mood, anxiety, and at times even an inability to eat or sleep. And one of the first things I did was get professional support. So of course, being in psychiatry, I have a bias and, I say therapy, 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 and it did wonders for me. But I also found mentors with a shared experience and I became an advocate and a mentor for others. And so, really, when I would say that my advocacy really springboarded or bloomed within medical school was the opportunity that I had to be a public ambassador for the Black Student Application Program. Now, this is an effort that is meant to increase the number of Black applicants at the University of Toronto, and it has the exact same entry criteria as other applicants. However, it aims to reduce the implicit bias that might be present within the file review and application process through incorporating more Black academics into the file review and interviewing process. And so when I was initially provided this opportunity back in 2016, I faced a lot of hesitancies and warnings. I was told that institutions do not like individuals who challenge the status quo. However, I felt that I was uniquely positioned to be able to advocate for this program, not only being the only Black medical student in my year, but I felt like this narrative, this chronic recurring narrative of being the only person in that space, not only for me, but also for other Black physicians in the field, deserved to have a platform. It deserved for light to be shone on it. And so I took the opportunity to advocate publicly for this, as well as sharing my experiences and kind of the harmful, deleterious effects of being the only Black person in that space. And I remember after I had kind of gone public and done all this media work for the Black Student Application Program, being told that I just ruined my shot at my dream residency and career, and that it was a huge risk I was taking advocating for this program. However, anyone that knows me knows that I am a person who stands by my convictions, and I truly did feel that it was incumbent upon me to be able to share this story and to advocate about something that I was so passionate about. And so in my second year of medical school, I stepped further into that vulnerability. And I released this poem entitled Woman Black that really further highlighted my experiences of being a Black woman in medicine and the challenges and the frustrations that I felt about being mischaracterized, but also not receiving enough support within the medical educational environment. And when talking about this poem, I'd stated that while doing the right thing can be risky, it's almost always a question of how to do the right thing, not whether or not to do the right thing. And I also took further opportunities to advance my advocacy, both clinically and non-clinically, and really speak to the power of representation. So one of the things that I did in my family medicine clerkship rotation is that I really realized that there were a lot of Black individuals who were coming in into the clinic that I was working at, which was situated in Regent Park, and that they had specific concerns about their hair. However, they had never felt actually comfortable discussing these concerns or even showing their hair because it was such a unique challenge that they felt like a lot of their practitioners might not have been able to identify. However, being in that space, I recognize it as an opportunity to not only advocate for them, but also mentor them and teach them as to how to take care of their Afro textured natural hair, but on a budget. And especially speaking to this concept of mental health, within the Black community, Black hair is so intricately tied to our sense of identity. It's so intricately tied to our history, to the struggle, but also to our wellness, to our mental wellness, to our physical wellness, to our spiritual wellness in a lot of the sense. And so being able to really advocate and talk about how Black hair is Black health, and being able to create this manual and have it put up throughout the clinic was one of the ways in which I saw that I was able to advance further my advocacy within the clinical space. And then from a non-clinical standpoint, really furthering that representation as a public speaker. So having had the opportunity to provide several keynotes throughout the course of the last 4 years, approximately 2 to 3 keynotes a month, talking about the importance of diversity in medicine, female empowerment, lying at the intersections of being a Black woman in medicine, and really harnessing your vulnerability is something that I have been very passionate about doing for the last 4 years, and also stepping further into that media and public arena, and often being asked, what keeps me doing this kind of work? And I often say that advocacy for me is self-preservation. It's a way of processing the pain of having to encounter micro and macro aggressions in and inside and outside of the clinical space. And I also found it incredibly protective for my own mental health and mental wellness. However, there is a dark side to advocacy. And I put up here just a few tweets of individuals who have said really nasty and hateful things towards me. And throughout the course of the last 5 or so years of my advocacy and stepping into the public space, I really left myself vulnerable in many ways to these kinds of attacks that continue on to this day. And for example, there are people who are, commenting on the general intelligence of Black individuals and African individuals. There are people who are calling me monkeys, calling me a monkey roaming the campus. People who are saying I was only a fraction of a white person. And so you can imagine what it would be like sitting through medical school lectures and then having your phone buzz and seeing all of these different um, vicious attacks on my character and really racist, hateful things being spewed at me as I'm there trying to learn and also getting concurrently pursuing my master's in medical school, and how dysregulating that would be. However, I continue to further my advocacy and step into that vulnerability and use advocacy as self-preservation. And I had the absolute honor of being named as a valedictorian of my graduating class of the University of Toronto. And I put an excerpt here that from my speech, in which I stated, I defined myself in the last 4 years through understanding and hopefully demonstrating that there is a power in narrative and in vulnerability. With a community to stand behind you and a mentor to guide you, you can take the risk that might move mountains. And within a day of becoming a doctor, earning my MD, and also having my story kind of circulate within the media, I continue to receive more attacks. There were people who would say, I wouldn't allow her to treat me, stating that I was barely passing medical school, that I had only won this title of being the valedictorian because I was a Black immigrant, even though I was born in Ottawa and raised in Brampton and have been in the GTA for so many years. That there was this earnest attempt to discredit the work that I had done, to strip me of my merit of being a physician within 24 hours of earning my MD and earning my master's in health systems and innovation. And so I had the opportunity to discuss the experiences of racism as a Black Canadian in the Toronto Star within a day of graduating from medical school, and contribute this piece towards the Black Lives Matter movement during the time of George Floyd's death. And so a part of what I had wrote, just an excerpt that I wanted to share, was that the aforementioned tweet reminded me poignantly within a day of becoming a physician, that there is no escaping the vice-like grip of anti-Blackness. It exists within the fabric of our society throughout all systems and strikes with impunity. However, the silver lining to my graduation was that on the same day that I graduated medical school as the only Black student in my class, we had also learned that 24 Black medical students were admitted to the University of Toronto, the largest class in Canadian history, the largest group of Black physicians in Canadian history. And being a part of that legacy and knowing that the risk that I had taken 4 years ago had contributed to this incredible historic moment was one of the proudest things that I think that I've ever been a part of. And now, fast forward to my time in residency and the choice of my medical specialty. And people often ask me, why did you choose psychiatry? And this is a quote from an interview that I did where I said, I chose psychiatry because it felt like a natural progression of my passion for advocacy and safeguarding vulnerable and marginalized populations. And of course, research is showing and research has reflected that there is a paucity of access to mental health care within the Black community. And there's also a lack of Black psychiatrists. And so stepping in to fill that gap and address those needs is something I was very passionate about. And so I wanted to take the opportunity to discuss this article that was written by Dr. Fatima Jackson Best and Dr. Fante Coleman, where they explored the barriers to accessing mental health care in Canada for Black youth. And there were a few key points that I just wanted to really quickly share. One of which, some of the barriers that they had highlighted was that Black youth wait on average much longer to access care than their white counterparts. So this is 16 months versus 7 months. They also have poor access to mental health practitioners, including psychiatrists, but also family doctors who do a lot of the lion's share of mental health work within the community. And then about a quarter of Black individuals who are accessing psychiatric care are doing so through the police or through judicial justice. So one can imagine how that inherently would be a traumatizing experience for a community that is trying to access mental health care. And then the internal and external stigma regarding mental health within the Black community, and the deeply entrenched history of anti-Blackness within mental health care, and the dark history of anti-Blackness within psychiatry, of which you can still continue to see vestiges to this day. And so I really wanted to touch quickly upon my own clinical experience in child psychiatry. I just finished a 4-month block in child psychiatry, and some of the main observations and kind of thoughts that I had as a Black physician in this space, as a Black resident in this space. And one of the things that I wanted to put forward was, recognizing racism as a form of developmental trauma in youth. And in psychiatry, we talk all the time about formulations. How is it that the biopsychosocial model of a person can formulate and inform their current clinical presentation? And I really drove this idea and really introduced into clinical discourse the idea of racism as a developmental trauma, and always trying to incorporate that into my formulations when I felt that it was relevant, as well as exploring racism in clinical discourse with patients, family, and the care team. One of the other things that I recognize is that there were so few Black psychiatry residents. And so trying to increase the interest amongst medical students, Black medical students specifically, in psychiatry as a field, and really seeing it as a beautiful opportunity to not only be an excellent doctor, but also to further the advocacy within our community, as well as really pushing to improve core and elective residency clinical experience, and of course recognizing that there is a paucity of research within this field and wanting to push that forward. And I also had the opportunity to be able to provide a TEDx talk earlier this year. And I wanted to share just a quick excerpt from the talk, where I state that you should dare to stand in your authenticity and occupy powerful spaces. Or if you've had the historical privilege of doing so, I dare you to make room for those to step in from the margins. By doing this, you will not only empower yourself, but actually shift the culture of a collective and inspire a generation. It's only when we do this that the gaps in equity begin to close and opportunities for success are made available to all. And I believe that that is so true, not only within medicine, but truly in any space where powerful, important decisions are being made, and where there are just true gaps in equity and lack of representation. So really bolstering those who are marginalized to stand in their authenticity, but also encouraging and daring others to make room such that those who are marginalized can step into that space and really just empower themselves and become empowered and shift the entire collective. And so I wanted to close with this idea of this full circle journey for me. So once again, this is, little Chico, and when she recognized that she wanted to become a doctor. And this past year, I've had the incredible opportunity to be able to partner with Barbie and to create a one-of-a-kind Barbie made in my likeness. And to me, this is such a powerful example of representation, and how now I could finally be that doctor, that Black female doctor that I wish I'd always seen growing up, and to let little Black girls know that this is possible, and really to let anyone know that if you chase your dreams, you can absolutely achieve them, but also encouraging others to provide support and mentorship so that these youth will be able to achieve these heights as well. And also having had the opportunity to be listed as one of Time's next generation leaders on this pursuit of trying to make Canadian healthcare more inclusive. And so I put this excerpt from these opportunities where I stated that it's dedicated to every little Black girl who thought her dreams of medicine were too wild to chase. We are redefining what a doctor looks like. And so lastly, just closing with this idea that my advocacy was kind of almost accidental in a sense from the beginning, but now it's purpose-driven and intentional advocacy. So both from my work as a clinician, doing research, but also looking at micro moments of patient care, occupying non-medical spaces. So working with Indigo as a board member and advancing their ideas of wellness and mental health, both inside and outside of the company, public public speaking and media, as well as furthering my writing through poetry, articles, and my upcoming memoir that should be released within the next couple of years. And I wanted to leave you all with this prescription for advocacy. So the first thing, and one of the most important things you can do, is if you are at a table where important decisions are being made, look around the table and see who is represented. And then ask yourself why or why not? Who is not present and what can I do to get their voice present at this table? The next thing you want to do, one of the most important and simplest things you can do, is validate. One of the most harmful things you can do is invalidate. And this is especially when someone comes to you with their lived experience of discrimination or marginalization. Validating their experiences is one of the most powerful things you can do, and one of the most important things you can do for their mental health as well. And then learning and unlearning. So really this is speaking to the ways in which we either consciously or subconsciously propagate discrimination and systemic oppression, and learning what that is, what that looks like, how that manifests for us, but then unlearning that through our behaviors, through our conscious activism, through our conscious anti-racism. And then once you've gone through the process of looking around the table, validating, learning, and unlearning, you can speak up, you can show up, and you can be a powerful advocate and be a powerful ally. And I believe that this is true within mental health spaces, but in truly any space where advocacy and allyship is important. And so I want to thank you for this incredible opportunity to share my story, to talk about my own experiences with mental health, but also the power of advocacy. And so thank you so much for this experience, and I hope you've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for sharing your moving and inspirational story with us, and for being available to also answer some questions about your keynote address. First off, I just wanted to begin with how you highlighted the importance of having therapy help you deal with the chronic toxicity of racism, as illustrated by the quotes that you shared at the beginning of your talk. How did it feel to reach out for help at that time, and what barriers did you face?
Certainly. So I felt that therapy was imperative to my healing. I talk a lot about advocacy as a form of self-preservation, but certainly part of this concept of self-preservation for me was actually getting therapy. And it was really important for me to also be able to find someone with whom I could identify, someone who had a bit of lived experience with anti-Black racism. And so I was very fortunate to be able to find a clinical psychologist who was a Black female as well, to be able to debrief these painful experiences. And that was just very, very important for me to be able to unpack and process and heal and go through medical school. I truly do think that having therapy through medical school and currently in residency has been a huge, huge component to my wellness.
Another piece I wanted to touch upon was how specialized clinics focusing on culturally competent care for marginalized and underrepresented populations are often unavailable, underfunded, or even outright cut. What would you recommend to address these issues based on your experiences?
Certainly. So I think that there needs to be an appropriate amount of resource allocation, that there needs to be this awareness of the inequities that are present within our communities, and that there needs to be active efforts made both at the community level, but also the government level, systemic level, to really try and address this. And when there are these gaps that are present, that there are other efforts in the meantime, as the more formal systems are being constructed, that there are efforts to meet the needs of that unique community where they're at. So whether that's on the individual level, trying to connect with them before the more systemic community-wide networks can be put in place.
And do you see a role for virtual care in that?
Certainly, certainly. I think that virtual care, especially within the context of the pandemic, but even prior to the pandemic and after the pandemic, I do think it is going to be hugely influential, because we now have the ability to connect with communities that are remote, to connect with individuals who might have had barriers to access in their care. Say, for example, if they don't have the means to travel to the clinic, or if they have certain disabilities that limit their mobility, and just, for example, having flexibility within their schedule and being able to connect with patients where they're at. And so whenever you have the means of being able to reach out to them and increase accessibility, I do think that that also helps to improve the gaps in equity for these marginalized communities.
There have been prominent women of color in the US, such as Megan, the Duchess of Sussex, and Simone Biles, who have become powerful mental health advocates. How do you hope to shape the conversation here moving forward, especially with your upcoming memoir?
I want to start by saying that I absolutely adore those two women that you mentioned, and I love that they furthered that discourse of mental health in the public eye. That is so incredibly important, to be able to have these conversations, because I do think that that's a reflection of vulnerability, and I do think that vulnerability is a strength. And now we're coming to see that, mental health is not. Should not be as stigmatized, should not be as taboo as it used to be, and that it touches so many of us. And so I hope through my memoir to continue that public discourse by talking about my own experiences with mental health, but also mental health within communities of color, and how it disproportionately impacts marginalized communities. And so certainly tapping into that vulnerability within the public arena is something that I also hope to further as well.
You address the challenges of having a social media presence. Building on that, and what would you recommend for managing rampant misinformation and disinformation flooding the system with the ability of social media to reach such a broad audience?
So I think that there is certainly a responsibility for those of us who are in these professional positions that also have an audience, to kind of spot the misinformation and call it out when we do recognize it. I think that's so important, but I also think that there is a responsibility as well, on the receiving end of the individuals who are using social media, to actively try and find the right resources in order to validate their information, so that they aren't vulnerable or susceptible to seeing misinformation. But I definitely do think that it kind of is that two-way street of making that information available, especially when you have the responsibility of an audience, when you're in a professional position, but then also, ensuring that you're going to validated, scientific sources.
I really appreciate, again, you taking the time to be here with us today. Best of luck with all of your future endeavors. You've got a lot going on, and it's amazing to see that momentum building with everything that you're putting in place. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Take care.
Bye. Thank you, Dr. Orwiowa. We will now transition to the OPA Council's own multi-hyphenate, Dr. Yusra Ahmad. Dr. Ahmad is a community and academic psychiatrist in Toronto. She graduated with a BA from the University of Chicago and an MD from the University of Toronto, where she also completed her residency in psychiatry. Dr. Ahmad has specific expertise in trauma, mood and anxiety disorders, as well as severe and persistent mental illness populations. She believes in the power of psychotherapy to address the struggles that spring from the human condition. She is dedicated to community work and advocacy around diverse issues such as marginalization, homelessness, poverty, refugee mental health, gender-based violence, and the struggles of Muslim youth and families. She's currently working at the Crossroads Clinic at Women's College Hospital and the New Beginnings program at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. She created a trauma-informed group therapy program entitled Mindfully Muslim, which blends mindfulness-based interventions with the sacred wisdom and teachings of Islam. She presented this program at the 2019 World Psychiatric Association Congress on Religion and Psychiatry in Jerusalem. Because of this work, she was awarded the 2019 Breakout Community Psychiatry Advocacy Award by the OPA, and her program was profiled in the centerfold feature article, Race, Religion, and Mental Health in the Black Lives Matter special edition of Chateauneuf magazine.
We find ourselves in times of trauma, turmoil, turbulence, and transformation. The very foundations on which we placed so much weight are heaving, groaning, and cracking underneath the strain. How does one regain one's footing when the ground beneath is no longer as solid as it once appeared and has, in fact, almost in the blinking of an eye, crumbled into quicksand? It's very natural to experience fear and anxiety under such circumstances, as well as pain and grief. Grief for not only the lives being lost, but the ways of life that are being lost. What does one cling to when our supposed material certainty, this physically solid ground, proves immaterial, elusive, and illusionary? I don't pretend to have any definitive answers to these deep questions. What I'm sharing instead is my stream of consciousness-like reflection in the hopes that it will provoke all of you to ask more questions in your own ways, born of the level of soul searching that these times of crises demand in our unflinching quest to shine a light on ourselves while we strive to support our well-being and our world. A good starting point for me has been to ponder if and when things were ever solid to begin with. For aren't we all in dynamic motion at any given moment? Which one of us is not but a coalescence of cells humming with biochemical and electrical activity? Cells which are comprised of atoms, which in turn are comprised of electrons spinning around layered orbits surrounding a nucleus containing one or more protons. These whirling dervish-like particles inside of us also swirl in a symphony to make up the surfaces that we stand upon. Everything is spinning, oscillating, waving, dancing, colliding, releasing, enlightening, lightning, and enlightening. So mathematical, chemical, physical, philosophical, and poetical. And all of this fluid ground we touch and make contact with is in and of itself part of a huge suspended spinning ball with a core that is completely on fire. This ball that rotates in its own orbit around yet another molten ball of fire-licked plasma, a radiant star, the temperature of which is 27 million degrees Celsius. It's unfathomable. At the very best of times then, we unwittingly surrender ourselves to a multiplicity of factors completely beyond our imagination and our human grasp. This is proof that we are inherently well-resourced at living with uncertainty and the unknown. The vast mystery of the cosmos, the universe within, which is as mind-blowing, if not more so, than the universe around us. And yet we can't resist this human urge, this desire to possess, to be assured with haughty certitude and hold dominion over every aspect of our existence, including the very march of time itself. The desire to halt time finds its expression in everything from the science and advertising of anti-aging creams to poetry. As Dr. Faustus pleads at the 11th hour in Christopher Marlowe's play, "Stand still, you ever-moving sphere of heaven, that time may cease and midnight never come." Try as we might, this proves to be an impossible task. We may rage at it, as Dylan Thomas wrote. By the way, I only wanted to read a stanza, but the poem is too good. It's so damn good that I have to read the whole thing. So here we go. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. These words resonate so fiercely because in them we recognize the futility of fighting this passage, this motion, this commotion, this emotion. Even if we remain defiant, we must all confront our mortality. For me, the power of this pandemic and all the concomitant pandemics of family violence, mental illness, addiction, racism, religious strife, really an explosion of conflict of every kind at every level, from internal conflicts to family conflicts to cultural conflicts to ideological conflicts to social conflicts to natural disasters or nature in conflict, is that it has revealed a grand tableau of the pain and suffering we experience when confronted with our own helplessness, and how we deal with, express, and manifest that pain, that suffering, that helplessness? Do we choose to destroy or create, tear each other down, or build each other up? Do we become more rigid or more flexible? Are we in fight or flight? Do we choose humility or sanctimoniousness? Will we choose the path of fear and mistrust, or choose the path of love and surrender? I talk a lot about love, and by love, I'm not just talking about any kind of love. I'm talking about the highest form of all-encompassing love, an intentional cultivation of radical acceptance, wholehearted compassion, and interconnected energy, ineffable, invisible, yet oh so palpable. You know it when you feel it, of the very kind necessary to set aside our individual differences and work for the collective whole. May our cores be whole, on fire with that kind of vibrant love, more radiant than any burning star. As feminist academic Bell Hooks wrote, to love well is the task in all meaningful relationships, not just romantic bonds. It is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. When there is no other ground to be found, may I continually root myself in that love, in that level of spiritual growth for myself and others. And for me, as a Muslim, which quite literally means one who attains peace, safety, and wholeness by surrendering myself to a higher power, that level of love is an obligation. It is mandated by my faith, as it is by just about every wisdom and faith tradition that I know of. There is so much beauty, power, and wisdom in this kaleidoscope of traditions with their variegated cultural and historical expressions in how they have tackled issues of meaning, purpose, pain, suffering, uncertainty, grief, and mortality in ways that are interconnected and completely timeless. There is so much beauty, power, and wisdom in stories, in poetry, in spirituality, in history, in quantum physics, in the natural world. We are not bereft of roadmaps and navigation systems. We've been down these roads before, guided by these stars in the heavens and the stars on the ground, comprised of and surrounded as we are by dancing stardust. I am left awestruck and breathless. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rahman. Reach is key for spreading the message. For our next segment, we have a powerful conversation between Eric Windler of Jackorg and Alex Aid of the Born This Way Foundation as they discuss their cross-border collaboration for a new suicide prevention program. Eric Windler started Jack.org with his wife, Sandra Hannington, and their closest friends in May 2020 after losing their son, Jack, to suicide. Since then, Eric has put aside his business interests and leads Jack.org full-time. With a staff of over 60 and 3,000 youth volunteers, Jack.org is Canada's only charity training and empowering youth leaders to revolutionize mental health in every province and territory. Eric works tirelessly to inspire discussion about mental health, especially among young people. In 2013, Eric received the Champion of Mental Health Award from CAMIMH and the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Medal. In 2015, Eric was honored with Queen's University, receiving an honorary LLD, recognizing his work in the field of mental health. In 2017, Eric and Sandra Hannington received the Meritorious Service Cross Civil Division from the Office of the Governor General. More recently, Eric was selected as one of the 150 CAMH difference makers for mental health in Canada. Eric is also recipient of the 2018 Queen's Alumni Humanitarian of the Year Award and the 2020 Ontario Psychiatric Association's Mental Health Advocate of the Year Award. Eric sits on the board of FRAME, a youth mental health best practices charity. Eric is joined by Alex Aid, who serves as the Director of Programs and Impact at the Born This Way Foundation. Co-founded by Lady Gaga and her mother, the foundation is committed to supporting the mental wellness of young people and working alongside them to create a kinder and braver world. The work includes their oversight of the Channel Kindness digital platform and program for sharing and inspiring kindness, their partnership with the National Council to create Teen Mental Health First Aid, their global campaign to build a habit of kindness called #BeKind21, their youth advisory board, their work on the ground in Las Vegas, and their strategic partnership with Jack.org to highlight and to build more digital tools and resources young people can utilize to gain the skills and confidence they need when it comes to supporting themselves and each other through mental health challenges. Alex works alongside young people and nonprofit organizations, companies, and youth mental health advocates from around the world. Before joining the team at Born This Way, Alex worked for Ariana Huffington and at the William Morris Endeavor Talent Agency in Los Angeles. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration and a Juris Doctorate degree from West Virginia University. After law school, he gained admission to the bar in his home state of West Virginia. Instead of pursuing a traditional career in law, however, he chose a career path focused on social good.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Eric Windler, the founder and executive director of Jack.org. I use pronouns he, him. And thank you so much to the Ontario Psychiatric Association for having us as part of tonight's event. We're very grateful. I'm thrilled to be representing Jack.org this evening, but equally thrilled to have our wonderful partners at Born This Way Foundation from the US joining us, represented by Alex Aid. So Alex, would you be kind enough to introduce yourself and share a little bit about Born This Way Foundation?
Absolutely. Hey, Eric, it's so good to see you, and hey to everyone out there. I'm Alex Aid. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Director of Programs and Impact at Born This Way Foundation. Born This Way was co-founded 10 years ago by Lady Gaga and her mother, Cynthia Germanata, with the mission to support the mental health of young people and to work alongside them to build a kinder and braver world. Our work has been and will always be youth-focused and youth-led. In fact, Lady Gaga and our entire team envision a world where young people are more equipped to handle life's challenges than she felt she was when she was growing up, as so many young people and their mental health challenges appear before the age of 14. Our programs and campaigns are informed by research, always with the intent of engaging young people and inspiring them to action. Programs like Channel Kindness, which is a safe space hosted at channelkindness.org for young people to tell their stories of kindness, resilience, and community. By highlighting the people and organizations that are doing good in their communities, Channel Kindness's audience is inspired to create a kinder and braver world, one story at a time. Our Global Youth Advisory Board, which is comprised of young people from around the world who inform our work daily and are helping to inform and create the future of our foundation. Our Please Stay pledge, which you can find at pleasestay.us, that reminds young people that they are needed here with us on this earth, that resources and help are available and accessible, and that together we pledge to stay. Be Kind 21, which is our yearly campaign that asks everyone everywhere to form a habit of kindness every day for 21 days and beyond. And then why we're here today, our partnership and upcoming work with Jack.org. Eric, I'd love to toss it back to you to talk more about your work at Jack.org.
Thank you, Alex. That's terrific. And I got to say, your founder's a little more famous than our founder. But I'm so glad you reached out to us. We founded Jack.org kind of for tragic reasons. If you had asked me 11 and a half years ago, Alex, I would have told you we're a very happy, healthy family with what we thought were 3 happy, healthy kids. But unfortunately, our whole welcome to the mental health space was a call from a police officer letting us know that our eldest, Jack, had died by suicide. He was a first-year student at Queen's University, and we had no idea he was struggling. So obviously we were devastated, but as we picked ourselves up, we started what was called the Jack Project, which was an initiative at Kids Help Phone. That lasted for 2 years, doing a landscape scan and a big pilot program to see where we could make the most difference and fill a gap. And we learned that young people were really being left out of this important conversation. So that's where our missions are so aligned. So we then tested the pilot with young people across the country, basing our charity at Queen's University for a year. And then in the summer of 2013, we became the independent charity and rebranded as Jack.org. And fast forward today, we have almost 70 staff and about 3,000 young people who actively volunteer with our programs in every province and territory of Canada. Briefly, our programs are Jack Talks, which we train and certify well over 100 incredible young speakers who learn how to share their stories and educate their peers about mental health. Now, this has the effect of reducing stigma and increasing help seeking. We have Jack chapters all over Canada. These are youth-led groups that really keep this conversation going all year long, which is so important. Jack Summits happen at the both local, regional, and national level. And these are youth-led conferences where young people get to connect, learn from one another and from experts, and then go back to their communities and keep this conversation going and advocate for better mental health. And then finally, I wanted to mention Be There, our resource that we developed as a result of young people wanting to know more about how to support their peers, not how to be their doctor or psychiatrist, but really just how to be a helpful peer. And that's what led to this partnership, which is so amazing. So Be There is a digital resource that is incredible. It's really exploded during COVID when people couldn't really get together and had to access supports online. And that led to our partnership with Born This Way Foundation. It started with our Be Kind, Be There campaign in the spring of 2020. And we collaborated there to inspire young people, and frankly, everyone, to take 5 minutes to learn how to be there for one another. All that activity translated into a huge rise in traffic to our BeThere.org site, including a 157% rise to users across the US. So during the campaign, 95% of visitors to BeThere.org found it useful as a mental health resource, and 78% said that using Be There, they felt better equipped to support someone struggling with their mental health. So Alex, what was it about Be There that fits so well with Born This Way Foundation's programs and mission?
Yeah, Eric, I got to say, and you and I both know from our work at our respective organizations, both, from the expertise of our teams to experts outside of our organizations to research that we've both done and research that we found, but most importantly, talking directly to young people. It's the importance of having straightforward, clear, and engaging resources that teach people how to support one another. And that's really what Be There is. Before we found Be There, from our end, we had seen a gap and we wanted to spread the word further about this incredible resource that you all had built. And we wanted to encourage young people and everyone really to learn how to act. With Be There, the 5 golden rules, saying what you see, showing you care, hearing them out, knowing your role, and connecting them to help. They're just a simple, actionable framework for approaching these conversations, and further, Be There recognizes the nuances in these conversations, and that there isn't always a one size fits all approach, but no matter what, right? The brave act of just being there for someone is in itself so helpful. When we talk about the foundation and about our mission to build a kinder and braver world, being there for yourself and for others, that truly epitomizes kindness. And for the first time in history, with the internet and our global reach, both of our organizations, we really have the opportunity to reach an entire generation of young people, to teach them how to be there for each other beyond just asking how they are, right? We are building a world where future generations know what to do and how to help when they or someone they know is struggling.
Thank you, Alex. Very well put. It makes me so proud to know that we're starting to share this incredible resource across the US. Us in Canada, we always think, well, the US is 10 times bigger than us. And so just imagine, the amount of good that we can do by jointly sharing this work. And as far as we're concerned, the US is just the start. We really want Be There to be shared really much farther. But already there has been over 758,000 users who have visited and learned from the Be There site. So Alex, I think we've probably both seen in our work that the conversation around mental health has increased, especially throughout the past couple of years and in the context of COVID, when we know, and the data tells us, that young people, the struggle that young people feel is actually increasing. But with this conversation growing, how do you feel or how do you see a path forward creating safe spaces for these conversations throughout our work and our partnership?
Yeah, this is really where it gets exciting, Eric. We have seen, especially over the past few years, more people, definitely young people, sharing their struggles and reaching out for help. We have such an important opportunity to continue to ensure that as many people as possible know how to safely and effectively look out for both themselves and each other when they're struggling with their mental health, or that they notice that a loved one is. They need content, they need resources that are inclusive and accessible, that are relatable, and that are approachable. One upcoming project that we're really excited about is the Be There certificate, which is currently, of course, the focus of our partnership with Jack.org. In the coming months, you'll hear more and more about this, and we're incredibly excited to be building this with you all, Eric. The Be There certificate is a free, self-paced learning experience designed to increase mental health literacy and provide you with the knowledge, skills, and confidence needed to safely support anyone who may be struggling with their mental health. It provides a deep understanding of Be There's golden rules, which again is a simple but actionable framework on how to recognize when someone might be struggling with their mental health, your role in supporting that person, and how to connect them to the help they deserve. What's also very exciting is that the Be There certificate will be available in French, English, and Spanish, the major languages of North America. And it employs approachable language, relatable illustrations, interactive activities, and realistic scenarios to deliver a diverse learning experience incorporating a variety of learning styles. This has just been incredible to build. And for example, the creation of French and Spanish versions wasn't just about sending the copy off for translation, right? It was also filming French videos in Montreal with Francophone youth and Spanish videos in Los Angeles with Latinx and Hispanic youth. We also had Spanish-speaking and French-speaking youth review the translations to make sure they strike the right tone to be approachable and relatable for Francophone and Latinx and Hispanic youth. We were also very intentional in designing the custom illustrations. It was important for us to represent the diversity of youth in North America in terms of gender expression, sexual orientation, body shape, race, ability, and even fashion.
Thanks so much, Alex. Very well put. And we are so excited about this partnership and the Be There certificate, which I often call the phase 2 Be There. And Be There will probably always reach more young people, but those who are keen and those who want to support young people can really go through that content and really learn it with a certificate. And doing so in an engaging way is critical with young people, or guess what? They'll just scroll on by. It's absolutely important. So we're hopeful that both the interactive elements and the scenarios layered into the resource will really be a solid foundation for Be There's 5 golden rules, and will facilitate even deeper understanding amongst young people on how to take care of their mental health and to support others. And I can't agree with you, Alex, anymore that this conversation about mental health, as it continues to grow, we have an opportunity and a responsibility to educate as many people as possible in order to better serve young people. Then we'll see an increase in awareness about how to access services and a reduction in shame around reaching out for help. And, you know, that really resonates with me. I know our son probably was feeling very embarrassed. He wasn't going to get through first year because he hadn't been going to class. It's so important to sort of reduce those barriers that shame and embarrassment and a lack of education create. So Alex, as we come to the end of our conversation, I wanted to know, what are you most excited about in the realm of mental health education and our partnership in 2022?
Yeah, I mean, I almost want to say this with a megaphone, right, on the top of like a platform or a building. And it's that through the Be There certificate, we have this like once in a lifetime opportunity right now to bring mental health literacy to as many young people as possible. And in doing so, really helping to address the gaps in equity, diversity, and inclusion in mental health training. You know, traditionally, right? Many of you all out there know this. I know we know this, and talking directly to young people, we've learned this, that mental health training is delivered in person over multiple days at a set time and location. And it's often costly, it's inflexible, you have to be there at a certain time, you know, all of that. And it varies in quality depending on the facilitator. And this is where the Be There certificate really shines. It removes the barriers of cost, removes the barriers of transportation, scheduling, you know, accessibility through digital mental health training that is self-paced, easy to access, and free of cost. We have this opportunity here to democratize mental health education and really ensure that we all have access to low barrier and high quality mental health and education. And that is why I so strongly believe in this partnership. I so strongly believe in what you all have built with Be There. And we are so honored to build this next iteration of Be There with you all through the Be There certificate. And I just can't wait for all of you out there to see it and learn from it.
Thank you so much, Alex. You know, what you said about the equity piece is so important because, you know, and I think it's the way, certainly this way in Canada, and I'm sure it is in the US and around the world. And that is that those from underserved populations, whether those be, you know, rural, remote, Indigenous, racialized populations, newcomer populations, they are at higher risk and they have lower access to proper services. And that also is something that has been taken into account with the Be There certificate program. So yes, this upstream education done in a really youth engaging way is so important to the well-being of our most precious asset, which is our youth. So with that, we want to thank all of the organizers of this event and the attendees for both having us tonight and for the work that you all do in mental health, not only in Ontario, but beyond. Thank you so much. We're very grateful to have had this chance for this conversation, and all the best to you all.
Thank you so much, Eric. I'm so honored to have been invited to be here today. And thank you all to everyone out there for learning about both of our organizations' work and all that's ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks again, Eric and Alex, for sharing that important information about your work on the Be There program. In closing, we also have some messages of support from the Ontario Medical Association. First up, we have their CEO, Alan Odette.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Alan Odette. I'm the CEO of the Ontario Medical Association, and really pleased to be here tonight. I want to say thanks to the Ontario Psychiatric Association and its executive and membership, and highlight Bell. The Bell Let's Talk series has had such a major impact on the lives of Canadians for so many years now. And so, Bell, thank you for the leadership that you bring, and particularly for sponsoring this evening event to highlight awareness around mental health issues. Prior to Christmas, the Ontario Medical Association launched a prescription for better health. It's a 5-point plan by doctors to improve healthcare in the province. One of the 5 pillars focuses on mental health and addictions, and I encourage the audience to look for that on our website. The topic tonight around providing safe places to talk about mental health in racialized communities, I think, is an important conversation, and I applaud the organizers for the topic. I'm looking forward to the discussion and dialogue, and again, I just want to say thanks to the organizers and to Bell for sponsoring this evening's event. Thanks, everyone.
Last but not least, we have Dr. Adam Cassim, President of the OPA.
Good evening. I'm so pleased to bring greetings to the Ontario Psychiatry Association's We're Listening event in collaboration with Bell Canada and the Coalition of Ontario Psychiatrists. As physicians, we understand the importance of mental health and its impact on people, families, and our communities. It's very common to feel run down, anxious, or depressed, especially now as we enter the 3rd year of a worldwide pandemic that has created a world of uncertainty and changed how we live and work. And while we have made progress as a society in recognizing mental health and supporting our friends and colleagues, there are still many stigmas surrounding mental illness and disorder. It can be hard for some to seek out care. That's why initiatives like Bell Let's Talk are so important, as we continue to raise awareness that it's okay to ask for help. It's wonderful that tonight's event is focused on creating safe spaces to talk about mental health in the context of equity, diversity, and inclusion. As part of our work to break down barriers to care, we must recognize that as a diverse society, there are differences in the way we approach mental illness depending on social, religious, and cultural values. I'm very much looking forward to continuing this work with all of you.
I hope that this evening has helped create more safe spaces in which to discuss mental illness in the context of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Thank you again to our sponsors, to our speakers, to you, our audience, and to our OPA team for your support. Don't forget to follow us on social media to discover more about what lies ahead. Good night.